All right, so this is part 2 for week 1 of our 2 weeks talking about flashes. So our last discussion we were talking about electronic flash units, and let's also talk a little bit about the built-in flashes on cameras. Many of our DSLR cameras have the pop-up flashes like this so that you can use a flash. Otherwise, all your point-and-shoot cameras also have a flash off to the one side typically. And as I said before, heck, even all of our cell phones are coming with flashes these days. There's a problem with our built-in flashes. They are convenient, but they're not very powerful. So the old inverse square law is actually amplified a little bit with these built-in flashes, where they die off really quick. And so the other things that we have with this is with their location or where they're placed, they don't provide light right directly on the subject in a way that provides natural lighting, and so we end up with situations where you have the red eye. We end up with issues on our macro photography, which is close-up photography, and we're not going to talk about macro photography till about 2 weeks from now, if I remember right. I'm looking down at my syllabus, and they really, they're not that bright. They're great for outdoor use, though. When you're on a sunny day and you're taking a picture of a person and the sun is coming over their shoulder and they're slightly backlit, that flash, it doesn't overpower and it works really well. The other really cool thing is we can actually set up some of our electronic flash units and put them in a mode where one flash will cause the next flash to go off. So we could have 3 or 4 flashes set up on a scene, and the built-in flash, when that goes off, that triggers the other flashes, and that causes a lot more light to come into our scene from all around. You see that a lot in like portrait photography. If you ever gone and had kids' portraits taken or gotten your portrait taken, you might have noticed that they had a light above you and off to the side of you, and then the camera had a little light on it too, and so that went off, and at the same time a bunch of other lights went off to really make you lit well and no shadows behind you on whatever background they had behind you. All right, so we don't do a lot of pictures of people per se in CSI, but do keep in mind we do need to take pictures like in bookings and stuff like that. Sometimes we're taking pictures of our victims of crimes and we've got bruises. So something that we need to worry about though is the red eye. One of the things that you can do to reduce red eye is diffuse the light, soften the light. We'll talk about diffusing flashes in a little bit. Sometimes we can talk about using like a bounce flash. We'll touch on that next week in part 2 or week 2 of this, where you end up having the flash on your electronic flash units. You can tilt them up and down, and so we've got the flash pointed up at the ceiling, and the light hits the ceiling and then comes down on the person versus straight at them. We can put on more lights in the room, and so we can increase the lighting of the room so that it's not just the flash hitting the person, but other light. Looks like my phone's ringing. All right, and we are back. Sorry for that. Phone, it happens. Anyhow, so we can turn on more lights in the room, and the other thing we can do related to red eye reduction is maybe ask the subject not to look directly at the camera, kind of have them tilt their head a little bit and kind of look off to the side so their eyes are over here. Sometimes that doesn't exactly look the most natural, look over my shoulder kind of thing. Otherwise, we've got the whole, red eye reduction mode in a lot of our cameras. So if we've got a victim's face and we're looking at bruising and you don't want this crazy red eye look, you want the more natural look, there are some options out there. All right, so something that happens sometimes with our built-in flash, we don't have any control over the power. And so what we end up from time to time is with the built-in flash, just a little bit too much light dumping into an area, and so we've washed out this image. We end up with a lot of shadow down here. It almost actually looks like a sync error when you think about like what we talked about in the previous recording with synchronization, except for the fact that we have a little too much light washing out. And I mean, even to the point where this little bit of couch cushion, you can't even tell what it is. And this is an area where a cigarette was left on an arm of a couch, and ended up starting a fire. And you've got the burrowing down in, but then also the burning across. And this hole is kind of my evidence, and it's all just is washed out. Likewise, too, issues where we've got an electrical outlet, or not the outlet, the plug, and you can see some damage on the plug here. But because we've cast a shadow, because the built-in flash is shooting straight across, we end up with these shadows being cast by the object that we're photographing, and so it loses us some of our details. So the built-in flash can have a little bit of error there. This is why sometimes the electronic flash units are good. And keep in mind, we don't always have to keep the electronic flash unit on the camera. We have cables where we can bring them off to the side and use lighting techniques that we'll talk about next week, like oblique lighting. One of the things, though, that really does help with some of our flashes, whether it's the built-in flash or an electronic flash unit, is to use the idea of a fill flash. So here we have a gentleman, the sun is right behind him, and you know, basically he's backlit, and we can see his face, though, because we're using a flash. The sun, though, is still so overpowering where you end up with this lens flare. But you know, if we had it moved just a little bit to the left, maybe he would have blocked the sun a little bit more for us. This is actually from like an advertisement, so you know, it's kind of an artistic picture. More likely here, where we, again, you can see the sun is up here behind this guy, and with the flash we can see his face. Otherwise, with the sun coming down, you can kind of see how the sun is kind of creating a ray of line here where the clouds are wisping over here, and this hat would otherwise be shadowing the guy where you wouldn't be able to see him because the brim of his hat would put him in a shadow. But now, because we have the flash on, we can actually see his face. One other area where fill flash becomes important for us then, from the idea of evidence collection, is sometimes items of evidence are inside of things or underneath things. So here we have a scene where there is a firearm left out by a car and the shadow of the car is blocking our view of the firearm. By using a flash, we end up now able to see the firearm. Now, keep this in mind. Fill flashes are great, but sometimes what really works nice is just to use a flashlight, where if I'm trying to fill in a shadow, if I'm looking in a desk drawer, trying to illuminate the scene with the electronic flash unit, it can be cumbersome. Just have a friend hold a flashlight for you, or hold your flashlight with one hand and your camera with the other, and you can actually get that scene just as well oftentimes. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about how we use flashlights next week when we start getting deeper into some other alternate lighting ideas. Now, one other little thing that happens with our flashes, whether it's an electronic flash unit or the built-in flash, is the light intensity can be too much, and sometimes we need to diffuse that. So with a built-in flash, sometimes you have to improvise. This is, you know, a piece of plastic that's taped onto the camera. With our other flash units, sometimes we have diffusers built right into the flash, and there are other devices you can click on over the top of flash units to help diffuse the light. But here we have an example of why we need to diffuse light. When we start getting into our close-up photography, what we have here is the image of a human brain at an autopsy, and you can't see anything because the moist surface of the human biologic reflects all that light right back at us. We're in a fairly well lit room to begin with, but we still need a little bit of fill flash to fill in the details on this, and we just can't see it. We've overexposed it. So what do? We diffuse the light on the flash. We end up covering the flash, and now we can see all the materials, and we can actually see what this cross section of the brain looks like. And at an autopsy type situation, our medical examiner can be telling us, what the significance of something in the structure is here, and we could be getting more details of that. Reflective surfaces also present us a little bit of a challenge with our flashes. So here we have, a ball bearing, and you can see some damage to it over here. You can see a big scuff mark in it here. So there is potentially some evidence here. And of course, all we really see actually is the reflector of our own flash. So if we diffuse the light, now suddenly that big gash in it, we can actually see, yeah, you get a little reflection of the photographer. That's just going to happen when you start taking pictures on reflective surfaces. But there's other things we can do to overcome that by setting the camera up on a tripod and getting out of the way potentially, but you're still going to see the camera. So imagine, with a diffuser and taking a picture of a fingerprint that's on a piece of glass, on a window, on a mirror. By having the diffuser, you're not going to have your flash bouncing off that mirror and coming right back at the camera and obscuring the image. What you're actually going to be able to do is diffuse that light so we can provide enough light to see the fingerprint, much like we can see this damage to this piece of metal, but we don't end up with the reflection like we do here. We actually see the proper thing that we're looking for. And even going one step further, looking straight down into that damaged piece, and you can see, again, we've got a little bit of light reflecting off of something else, but we're diffusing here more by distance than we are by using our diffuser, but we're still ending up getting a nice image of that. All right, so if anybody has any questions, please let me know. You have an assignment where you need to be using a fill flash. I would suggest just using a flashlight if you don't have access to an external flash unit, but take and hide some objects underneath things, around things, wherever, so that they're in a shadow, and try and get me some images of them inside of their compartment, whether it's a desk drawer, under the seat of a car, under the car bumper, any of those kinds of situations. Present me with some images like that for your photo assignment. All right, I will talk to you next week, and we'll start talking about some advanced flash and low light situations.